Okay, colleagues. Hello. How we doing? Let me check here. Check a little audio. Make sure I got the right mic. Okay. I think I do. All right. Make sure I'm all lined up. Hello. Welcome. Happy Tuesday to you, or Tuesday, as maybe we should call it. Going to be talking about burnout, going into a breakthrough, and my daughter's in the background working on some schoolwork, so she's probably gonna be laughing at me while I do this, but gotta do it. We gotta do it. Quick shout out to the great people of Fargo, North Dakota, who I got to visit several weeks ago, do some professional development around student motivation. It was a great time. Had a good time doing it. Colleagues, you doing well? Okay. Yeah, I see that I've got a live feed going, so for better or worse, let's get to it. Hey, real quick, I want to give a quick shout out to somebody, Christopher Albert, who saw me yesterday attempt to give this very talk that I'm giving. And as I described in an email that I just sent out to my newsletter readers, I quit in the middle of this thing. I just, I made a mistake using this presentation software. It was Monday. I don't know if you ever feel this, but sometimes teaching on a Monday is just I don't know. Sometimes just my brain feels like it's in a fog, and it was definitely like that. End of the school day, oftentimes can be a foggy time. So one way or the other, there was like 3 people watching the talk live. So I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna try again a different time. That's like something that when you're actually teaching, you don't get to do. You don't get to just tell the students, you know what? I'm gonna just try a different time. You have to do it. So yesterday, giving this talk, I didn't have to do it, so I just didn't. Go ahead, share in the comments. Check in with yourself. Are you feeling any of the 3 things that are on this screen? I'm talking about, are you feeling challenge in your work as an educator? Or are you feeling something more severe than that? Are you feeling burnout? Or are you feeling demoralized? You feeling those things? Put that in the comments. Yeah, I'm feeling this way. It's not a unprofessional or a weak thing to acknowledge the reality of how we're feeling, how we're currently doing. That's a totally square, sane, healthy thing to do, to just say, yep, feeling like this. So let me tell you a story that I call the teacher's journey. Okay, the teacher's journey is pretty straightforward, and you can look at this at the scale of a day. You can look at this at the scale of a week, a unit, a semester, a school year, a career. I find it useful in all those different scales of time. So at some point, we decided we're going to be a teacher. I decided that this morning when I woke up, got dressed, did a shower, and went to school. Decided I would be a teacher. I decided this when I was in college, bound and determined to be, studying pre-med, and I went and I shadowed a doctor, and I shadowed him for a couple of hours. I was assigned to do this by my pre-med program, and the doctor looked at me after I shadowed him, and he said, you know what? You better love what you just saw, because that's going to be your whole life. So you better love what you just saw. And I just had this total moment of, I don't know, what's like a horrifying epiphany. Like, basically, shoot, my plan of being pre-med just completely crumbled because I don't like what I saw. And eventually, it took me a couple of experiences and a number of months, but eventually I decided that I would become a teacher as a very, very young man. I decided I would be a teacher this year when I entered into this school year, and so on and so forth. So there's this decision, but inevitably we run into a challenge, a situation that it kind of like accuses us of not being enough. I get that 5th hour class, and it's just like, I don't know, the things that I did last year, they're not really working with 5th hour. 5th hour is just, it seems like this group of students are completely unimpressed with my great competence and skill, and it's not doing anything. It's not making a difference. So what am I supposed to do? That's a challenge. It's this moment where, hold up, this rose-colored picture I had when I decided to be a teacher, where I'd get to pour into students, and it'd be this like literally rose tinted, and then I'd be done, and I'd just be able to from a full heart, a full soul, I'd just be able to write books and stuff. That was kind of my picture, as a young man when I decided to become a teacher. You know, the challenge is no, it's not going to be exactly that way, because you're going to have to deal with student misbehaviors. You're going to have to deal with an overwhelming workload. You're going to have to deal with lots of pressure. You're going to have to deal with a crisis that happens when we realize that the system that we're dedicating our lives to is imperfect and maybe even causing some of the problems that the system is meant to deal with. So these challenges can lead to a couple of places. Hopefully they don't go here, but they can. They can go and they can run us right into the wall. Oftentimes, though, what they'll do is they'll lead us to do the work that it takes to become competent, to figure out classroom management for that new fifth hour that I can't figure out, to deal with my pressure in a different way, to handle these deep questions that I'm having existentially. I can arrive at greater competence, okay? And this can, but the thing is, you just hop right back in the cycle, and that greater competence inevitably leads to a lack of being able to handle whatever it is that we're facing, and we're challenged again, and so on and so forth. And maybe you add responsibility to the mix, and now all of a sudden you got more things that are on your plate, and then you loop back and you're going and you're faced with challenge again. Eventually, you will end up hitting the wall. The wall is what happens in the teacher journey. The wall is what happens, I think, in the human journey. We get to a point where stress, pressure, deep existential questions overwhelm us, and these are often referred to by people who study this type of thing as either burnout or demoralization. So when we're thinking about burnout, you want to feel about feeling stretched out like putty. There's just like not enough of you to go around, so you're constantly stressed. A person who is burnt out feels like they're just going through the motions, just constantly in survival mode. Survival mode is a good way to describe burnt out. These are folks who, it's not that they think that teaching isn't worth it. It's not that they think that the thing they've dedicated their life to isn't good. It's just that they don't know how they can possibly do it in a way that will feel good, because they're burnt out, they're stretched out. Chase Mielke, the author of a book called The Burnout Cure, he describes burnout as when you have a sustained desire. It's not even always a logical thing. It's not like a logical wish, but this sustained desire, this yearning to quit teaching. That's what burnout feels like. Burnout for a student would feel like this sustained desire to quit being a student. Burnout, super normal, not just something that teachers experience, something that lots of different types of peoples and roles experience. Okay, now demoralization, that's a little bit of a different thing, because demoralization is when all of a sudden you start to run into, you start to run into really, really deep, hard, painful questions. Okay, I forget the author, and I'm really feeling bad about that right now. Maybe I'll actually look it up. Author of book on teacher demoralization. Doris Santoro. Yep, the book's called Demoralized. Okay, this is the person that really drew my attention to this idea of demoralization being something very different from burnout. And demoralization is when you basically feel that you're doing something that's wrong. Like, what I'm doing is bad. I don't want it to be bad, but it's bad. I'm like participating in a wrong. Or you start to really, really question whether or not your effort is doing anything good at all. So demoralization is what can happen. And again, like this teacher journey, you can experience the whole journey in a day. That's what's kind of crazy, and I think is good if we let it be about teaching, is that we can go through this really comprehensive human experience in a single day, where this morning time, first hour, it went good, had a nice pop of debate. Second hour went good, nice pop of debate. All of a sudden, you run into your prep, you get kind of distracted. Maybe you have a conversation you weren't expecting with a colleague, and then you hit fourth hour, and it's just like things are really off, and the student who you thought you were having a breakthrough with, they were really starting to grow, like they're totally regressed and showing these problems that they had 2 months ago. I mean, you can just start to, all of a sudden you're just like, I'm just really frustrated. I'm really questioning whether or not I know at all what I'm doing. Like, am I bad at my job. I think I'm bad at my job. I'm not very good at this. Or you're teaching a unit maybe that you have to teach, and it's something that's, your department decided on, and you personally don't like the unit, and you think that the way that it's designed it doesn't line up with what you got your master's degree in, and so you're like teaching this unit and with fidelity, but like you feel this type of spiritual pain because it's something is a good thing to do. So these are what the wall is like. These are, and I'm telling you that these things are I think inevitable. So where you at, colleague? You feeling either of these? You're relating to either of these ways that the wall is experienced? Guys, any light bulbs going off for you? Obviously they're going off for me because I'm talking about these things and I'm not like making this stuff up. This is real, actual stuff. And again, like I said at the very beginning, it's important stuff to articulate, to voice. I mean, put it in the comments like, yeah, I feel demoralized because blank. Yeah, I feel burnt out when blank. These are useful things to articulate and to look in the comments. I mean, I see, Nancy saying this year's been incredibly challenging, and I recognize Nancy's name from past correspondences, and I know that Nancy is a great educator. Right? So I see when, this is what's so cool, colleague, when we can articulate really intelligently, robustly. Like, I hope you don't get the impression that I'm complaining right now. I'm just describing reality. Okay, but when we can do that, and we say that out loud, or we put that in the comments, what starts to happen is we immediately begin to feel a bit of depressurization because it's like, oh, it's not just me. Recently, we had a staff training here at my school, and someone was talking about collective efficacy, and one of my colleagues who I really respect, Mr. Frizio, he basically, really, to me, eloquently, poignantly talked about what it's like when you're teaching your best, you're bringing a whole career's worth of knowledge and expertise to the craft of teaching, and you're just seeing a lot of students not getting it. He really voiced this, I mean, in a way that I can't match. But I felt drawn to him. I felt drawn to this profession. I felt like I wanted to just camp out and talk about this and unpack what it feels like as a human soul to go through that. So a long way of me saying that it's good. You're doing a service not just for you but for others when you articulate, I'm feeling this stretched out burnout state. Here's what that's like. I'm feeling this sense of, gosh, did I ever learn how to teach? Even though I'm almost 20 years into my career, here's what that's like. Like, you're doing yourself a service, you're doing other people a service. It's a lot of good stuff that we can do. So yeah, if you're watching or commenting, put that in the comments, and you'll do two things at once: help yourself, help someone else. So like basically what I've been saying is you're going to end up at the wall. I've met in my career, which has involved not just teaching here in this classroom, but also traveling around the country, even the world, talking to teachers, emailing with teachers. Amanda, hello. Corresponding with people, developing years-long relationships. And I don't know, maybe I've met 5 people that tell me with totally straight faces, like, yeah, never really got burnt out. Like, I don't understand what it is that you are, but you are an amazing creature, and I am a bit envious, because I think for most of us, we do land at this wall. We end up at this wall. But what I'm going to try to say, colleagues, is that this is actually it can be something that we turn for our good. But we have to do something about it. We have to treat the problem that we're facing, the problem of the wall. And I think that there's three basic things that we can do. We can depressurize the self, we can make work behave, and we can wrestle with big questions. And I'm not going to handle all of that stuff in this talk today, but I'm going to handle some of the stuff because I think it's really important. But before I do that, let me just finish the teacher's journey. When we do this, what I'm calling inner work, okay? I don't like inner journey. I changed that today. during my prep, but not on the slide apparently. When we do this inner work, it will pretty reliably lead to a newfound energy. That energy will come from clarity. It'll come from a renewed vision for what we're trying to do. It will come from tapping into the deepest sources of human value. Value is a belief that is totally foundational to human motivation. And motivation is basically, I experience this energy. I experience this energy that is drawing me into caring, right? Like I'm no longer doing this because I have to, I'm doing this because I want to. So when I say newfound energy right here, it's not just like cute YouTube slide guy, use the self-help lingo. I'm like, no, you actually do tap into, through this inner work, a type of energy that is, I think, dormant in the human soul, unless it's given certain conditions, which this work creates. All right. Let me take a breather. Let me take a little sip here. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of go into the second half of the talk here now and provide some practical things, like be very practical. So and a lot of what I'm going to do here is reference, the work that I've been doing as a writer and a creator for educators over the last, coming up on 13 years. I started writing my blog for teachers in 2012. So crazy, wild, coming up on 13 years. I was in my late 20s when I started that blog. I'm in my early 40s now. So I'm going to reference some of that work, link you to some of that work, and it's all going to be hopefully helpful. And really attached to this very practical question. I think that this is like, I don't know. I was talking actually with a friend yesterday who was a curriculum director for years, Michigan Teacher of the Year, like just a great mentor to me named Jen. And, we were kind of talking about how sometimes as a teacher, even as a real professional teacher, you just want to be told what to do. Like sometimes I just want you to tell me, what should I do? What should I do? I don't want to have to figure it out for myself. What should I do? So what I'm going to tell you is this is what you should do if you are in one of three scenarios that are depicted on my little teacher journey chart. So if you're not at the wall, if you're watching this talk for some reason and you feel fine, you're like, I don't know, I'm good, pretty engaged in my job. There's stuff that I'm working on. Then here's what you should do. Here's what you should always do when you feel okay in teaching. You should work towards competence. You want to work towards competence. Competence in a craft as complex and timeless as education means that competence can always be improved. I can always become more competent. What do we mean by this word competent? I like this idea of right here, meeting together, in agreement, symmetry. It's like I want to bring all these different skills that are involved in teaching all together. I want to become a more integrated professional. And I think that this is true. When you really pursue competence, just being good at the different stuff you have to be good at in being a teacher, it just starts to become, it becomes less these different little skill sets, then it becomes this whole integrated, self. And it's and you run into this, I've run into this when writing my books. It's man, I want to treat one topic, the topic of student motivation, right? But when I got into my book on student motivation and I'm getting to, I had to have somewhere in the book that dealt with, well, it's really helpful when you're trying to cultivate student motivation to just be good at a number of things. And these things can be very overwhelming when it seems like everything's broken. So in the book, in Strategy 2, I recommend focus on just one of these things on this chart here at a time. And that strategy is called Improve at One Thing. So if you're good, if this is you, I'm good, I'm not at a wall, I would say, okay, then pick one of these things that's on the screen right here and set some goals, 1 to 3 goals, practical, measurable, SMART goal type stuff in one of these areas, and dedicate a clipboard to this in your classroom and just work on this thing, work on that thing, try to get good at that one thing. my work my work can best be understood as in my book, The Will to Learn in These Six Things, as I'm like saying, here are some projects that you'll have a good time working on. Think about teaching as it's like project-based learning. And so what I'm saying in these six things is that something that I do for myself is I'll focus, for this trimester on building knowledge and just helping my students to build knowledge. And so the things in chapter 3 in my book, These Six Things, I just give myself permission to that's all I'm really trying to do better at. And people ask me, Dave, how do you do it all? Something that I do really good at is ignoring a bunch, meaning that I don't ever do it all. I've never been a guy that can do it all. I think there are some people who are just incredible high capacity. They can hold all these things in their mind. I really can't. And that's part of why my writing resonates with a percentage of the profession, because I think other people are like me and they just can't do it all. They can't hold these things in their head. So what I'm saying is pick an area of competence building. If you're like, nah, I'm good, dude. I don't know why y'all talking about burnout and stress. What's your problem? But keep that to yourself. Don't tell us that. Don't tell us that. Okay, so yeah, competence. Oh, and I loved this. I wanted to point this out. In the 1630s, this word competence meant living at ease, sufficiency of means for living at ease. I think that's what you're after. I think all of us who are in this profession of education should be trying to how can I just get good enough at stuff to be able to live at ease in my job and provide an enjoyable, productive learning experience for students on a consistent basis. I mean, that's like a legit goal. That's really good. Okay, but if you're watching this talk, you're probably not really feeling the purple column there. You're more like, okay, Dave, I'm burnt out. I'm feeling these things right here. That's checking a lot of boxes for me, bud. What do you recommend that I do? Well, colleague, just so you know, I'm checking a lot of these boxes too. I'm feeling a lot of these things. So let's talk about real practically what will reliably lead to burnout. Why you and I are quite certain to run into burnout. It's something I call the workload-pressure cycle. Wrote about this a number of years ago. So the idea is that in teaching, there is an ever-expanding amount of work that has to be done. I started teaching in 2006. Felt like there was a ton to do then. I guarantee if I went back in time and had to do my same job in 2006, there's just fewer things that I was expected to do, fewer technologies I was expected to use in the classroom. I think students, as a result of having access to fewer dopamine nuclear bomb devices in their life, they were easier to engage than they are now. There's just a lot of reasons why I think teaching every year that you teach it kind of has this expanding workload. Okay. And then I think teaching also is just an inherently high pressure situation. There's just a common selective factor that brings people in education. They tend to be people who care a lot. They're not all, but they tend to be people that care a lot. They're people that really, really believe in the mission and what's possible in an education. They're people who have experienced this themselves. And so, it's very, very difficult for most educators to not experience high amounts of pressure. Okay, so both of these things are true. And I think they're only going to become more true with time. And then when you add on to the fact that outside of teaching, I think modern life becomes increasingly complicated. The workload of life becomes more and more and more overwhelming, and the pressures of life have become more and more overwhelming. So I think a byproduct of social media, the internet, the myriad types of ways there are to spend your time, spend your life, a lot of pressure, a lot of workload. Okay, that's not good, Dave. Can I have some good news? No, you may not have good news yet. You have to wait for the good news. Because we have to talk about the Yerkes-Dodson curve. The Yerkes-Dodson curve is one of my favorite summaries of how creatures work. maybe like ever. So it's just this idea that if you don't pressure a person at all, if you don't pressure your students at all, if you don't pressure me at all, I won't perform very well. Okay, my performance will be pretty low. I'll be bored, apathetic. Okay, you start to crank a little bit of pressure on me though, and you're going to find that I'm going to typically rise to the challenge. This is part of why students need high expectations from their teacher. Okay, but let's keep with the student analogy for a minute. If you continue to crank up those expectations on students and don't provide adequate support, what you'll eventually end up with is students that start to go down the other side of the Yerkes-Dodson slope. And the problem I always say to teachers, the problem with being down here is you suffer the double whammy. You're doing really bad. Your performance is bad, right? My performance is just as bad as if I had no pressure at all. But the problem is being burnt out or anxious, I would argue, is much, much more painful and damaging to the human soul than being bored. I mean, there's a lot of people watching this who are like, gosh, I don't even remember what it was like to be bored. You know, sometimes I want to say to my students when they're like, oh, I'm bored, like, yeah, be grateful for that. That is a privilege to be bored sometimes. Okay, so what I'm saying is, you know, this is really a big problem, because if we're over here and we have too much pressure, our performance goes down, which means that this is actually a cycle. This is a workload pressure cycle. As pressure ramps up, your ability to deal with your workload diminishes. Now your work piles up, and so your pressure increases. So people who are burnt out are almost always, like in my own life, I'm always, when I'm feeling burnt out, I'm caught in this workload pressure cycle. And what's helpful about representing this dynamic, like I have here on the screen, is that there's actually two things that I can do, just logically, to disrupt this cycle. I can do something about my workload, and I can do something about my pressure. And this is like not going to be a 5-hour talk, so I'm not going to go into crazy levels of detail. If you're watching live and have a question, or watching afterwards, put it in the comments. Like I can answer a specific question, but basically, I mean, this is what you very practically have to do to work yourself out of the workload pressure cycle. You have to diminish workload. You have to diminish pressure. So what I spent an hour or so this afternoon working on is something that specifically helps with depressurizing the teacher soul. And again, there's like more than I could go into in this talk. So what I'll just say is, if you want this little checklist that I made, okay, this is what it looks like, 45 different things, many of them with links to my blog, that you can do to depressurize your teacher soul, your parts of yourself. Just go to this, well, go to this link, davesurgeon.com/ls. And that'll give you like a little automated email sequence. I think it's 5 days, and kind of explain this checklist that I created. But just please, colleague, understand, like, I think it's so important in teacher PD, we really don't pay enough attention to making sure that we understand what we're doing. You should, I think whenever you make a human being do something that they don't understand why they're doing it, the human being is going to pretty quickly like revert back to the mean. Okay, this is true for students too. So what I'm saying for you and I is, I want you to think about, as you do this depressurization stuff, if you're burnt out right now, that's what I recommend that you do. Like, think about why it's working. Think about what does a walk do? What does an appuccino do? What does sharing with a colleague 3 very specific emotion words? I feel this and this and this right now. A colleague that you trust. Like, what is it actually doing in the soul? And what it's doing in the soul is it's releasing pressure. Because this pressure gets stored up in our relational aspect, our emotional aspect, our mind, our will, our body. This pressure gets stored up, and you can actually release that pressure by doing certain things. The human soul will respond to those things with the release of a bit of pressure. And the point there is that that's going to now get us more towards the sweet spot of the Yerkes-Dodson curve. And from that spot, we have to attack workload. You got to start to do the thing where you say, you know what, email, sorry, you're not closely enough attached to the long-term flourishing of my students and their growth, so I'm checking you twice a day, that's it. And I'm going to put a filter or a blocker in Google Chrome. I'm going to do whatever I have to do so that I can break this stupid email habit. And I get the email habit too, colleague. And I'm saying it is not good because it's a source of pressure for tons of us. Checking your email all day. And it's just, I've yet to meet someone who can make a compelling case that, me checking my email 10 times a day is increasing the quality of life or the quality of my output. So that's a long way of saying you attack the workload from a place of reduced pressure, which is why I'm saying attack pressure first in the workload pressure cycle. That making sense to you? Oh, yeah, okay. Got some funny comments here in the people who are here live. Yeah, I remember being bored. Brooke, yeah, 3 kids, 7 and under. Right. Yep, beautiful, great. Okay, last thing, and then I'll take any questions people here live, or I'll just close us up. But the last thing is, what if I'm feeling demoralized, Dave? What if I'm like, what if I'm like, it's not so much a stress and pressure thing and feeling stretched out. What if it's like, I don't even know if I believe in school anymore. Well, first of all, to help you feel maybe like this is not something that's wrong with you. The reason that I started doing these YouTube live talks, because I started with this talk on the student motivation apocalypse, is because I was feeling that way. I was genuinely looking at, it was particularly AI. And if you've been following my blog through the newsletter over the year, you can see a couple of places where I've kind of shown you my cards. Like I wrote this article in the fall called "The Robots Have Won." It's just like giving me some existential questioning, and I think, well, let me not skip to there. It's giving me some existential questioning in the sense of if AI, and I encourage you, if you've got the stomach for it, use some of these models that have been released in the last week and a half. Claude is one of the AI companies that they just released a new one yesterday, and I gave it a really tough question, something that I've wrestled with in terms of taking my book, The Will to Learn, and making it more practical and applicable for people, helping people to actually apply it. So I fed that thing my entire book, and I basically described the problem that I'm having in some of the partner schools that I work with, and I mean it's just kind of dumbfounding stuff, the level of inference that these things can do. My point being that this led me to really asking some hard questions, is teaching students to write, is teaching students to think critically really, really something that's important. And if you follow what I've been doing over the year, you know that I land consistently on, it's still really important. It's absolutely critical for long-term flourishing. Human beings are always going to need PERMA. We're always going to need experiences like this. So I don't want to rehash other talks that I've given, but the point here on this one is, if you're feeling demoralized, I'd recommend listening to this talk on the student motivation apocalypse, or this talk on school being outdated, because I kind of deal with some of that demoralized questioning there. So all that we've looked at today kind of can be summarized with what you got on the screen here. All that we've looked at is what I call the teacher's journey. And I argued that you can experience this in a day, a week, a month, a year, a career, and you probably do at all those different scales. At least if you're like me, you do, because I go through this stuff on the regular. If you're currently not in the part of the journey where you feel demoralized or burnt out, focus on competence. That's literally what I do, and what I found to be the best, most reliable path to increasing my enjoyment of this job, my own PERMA, positive emotion, engagement, relationality, meaning, achievement. Like the most reliable way for me to promote my own long-term flourishing while I'm at work is to build my competence at teaching. And really everything that I've written, all the videos that I make, they're just 1,000 attempts. And I think I do have over 1,000 blog articles now. It's like 1,000 different attempts at figuring out what in the heck does it mean to be a competent teacher? How do you become one? How do you become a teacher who doesn't just look good, but is good? How do I become a kind of teacher who doesn't just talk the talk, but actually day in and day out tries to walk the walk and to improve the walk? So if you're not stressed, you should work on competence. And if you are stressed, you should attend to depressurization. And if you're demoralized, basically the way out of demoralization is you either quit, or hopefully you don't have to quit because you can find a way to make the work make sense to you again. But you can't you can't run away from demoralization forever. It typically requires soul searching. And all of this is to say, colleague, last thing, is that I think this is part of why teaching is a great career. Because teaching gives you an opportunity to deepen yourself as a human being. And as you do that, you get to make a very significant difference in the lives of other human beings. And typically, hopefully, you get to do it while teaching something once in a while that you really think is cool. Like the content is really cool. So, did I turn a talk about burnout, demoralization into an argument that teaching is good, can be good, even though it so frequently involves these experiences? I tried to. I gave it a shot, gave it my best effort. So I will hang out for a moment and finish my coffee. If you have any questions that you want to ask me, those here live, feel free to do so. I'll say while maybe some folks are typing, I appreciate those of you that are here. That's really, really kind of you to give your time that way. Dana and Michelle and Tammy and Brooke and Robert and Nancy and Amanda. Much love and respect to you, my colleagues. Yeah, Eric, appreciate that. Respect. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna keep fighting the good fight. I'm convinced, even though I always get tired this time of year, but I'm super convinced this is a great way to spend your life. Teaching is a great way to spend your life. I think we're probably in store for lots of change in the next 10 years of our careers. Those of you who are going to be around in 10 years, I think we're going to probably see a lot of change. But I think it's still going to be a great way to spend your life. Great work. Tammy, I keep reminding you of the basics. That makes me feel glad because I often describe myself as a professional reminder. My job is to remind people of things. All right, colleagues, I have been yours, Dave Stewart Jr. I appreciate you, and I hope that you have a good rest of your day. Thanks for coming and checking out this talk on burnout, from burnout to breakthrough, how to get through those tough times without losing yourself, and actually, perhaps, by finding yourself in those tough times. I'll talk to you next time. Take care.